Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Soulfullpreneur Talk Radio with your hosts Rachel Archelaus and Megan Crandlemire. Merging spirituality and business on the Enlightenment Evolution Network.
Hello, my friends. This is Rachel Archelaus, and thank you for listening to Soulfullpreneur Talk Radio. It's February 24th, 2015, and we have an amazing show today. I have Megan Crandlemire here from Connecticut.
Hello.
And we have Nora Herold today as our guest, and she'll be on in just a few minutes. We're going to talk to her about what it's like to live as a channel. You know, the majority of the work she does is really bringing through other energies, other groups of beings to talk to us, and it's got to be a different kind of life than someone just living as one person. So I'm super excited to find out what that's like. And you can talk to her if you want at 347-308-8788. We welcome your calls and your questions. The chat is also open, so if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, you can log in with a free Blog Talk account and type us some comments during the show. Tell us what you like, what you want more of. You can ask us a question in there, and Megan will reply. And you can also find us at soulfullpreneur.com. And full has two L's because we are full of soul. You can also find our archived shows on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, as well as our own website. So we are part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network, and there are shows pretty much every day of the week. You can find out more by going onto Facebook and going to Enlightenment Evolution Network. There's a list of everything we do and updates about each show. And just so you know, any opinions expressed on Soulfullpreneur Radio by us or our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. So thanks for being here. We're really excited to get speaking with Nora. If you don't know who she is, she has been channeling, lecturing, and doing healing work for over 20 years. She channels a multitude of high vibrational beings, including the Pleiadian Collective, Yeshua, Kaliandra, Inara, the Lyrans and Lemurians, the fairies and angelics. And in 2007, she began receiving transmissions specific to the integration of the fifth dimensional identity and the reascension process, and has incorporated that information into her work. Nora offers private sessions, teaches, lectures, is a Reiki master, has appeared on film, radio, and TV, and has channeled for people all over the world. She is wonderful. I love going to her teleclasses and downloading her information, and I've had a session with her. She's just amazing. So we're so happy to have her. Hey, Nora.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Megan. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Nora.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today, and to all of you tuning in, thank you so much for linking up with us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Yes. It's such a treat.
Great to be here. I'm coming off of a 2-day workshop that just happened up here in Ojai this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So I've got a nice relaxing week this week as I kind of process that experience myself. I always take some time for myself after doing an event like that, so I kind of clear my schedule from clients. So it was a perfect week to have this conversation with you both.
Wonderful. Well,
perfect.
we've been wanting to do a day in the life type of series on our show, talking to different people, because your type of work is just so different than a regular person with a regular job working at a mall or whatever. So we wanted to ask you some questions today as to how you deal with everyday life in addition to these magnificent energies that you connect to. So that's our goal for today.
That's great. That sounds great.
Yeah, so we figured we would just start right at the morning, and ask you if you have any morning rituals or, anything specific that you eat for breakfast every day. What is it like when you wake up?
Yeah, so I'm often awoken by my cat, the Smurf, and my dog Zoe, who I know to be more than cat and dog, as we are more than earthlings. So I'm very aware of their kind of earthly identities as a cat being and a dog being, and then the other energies they work with. So the Smurf has a lot of fairy energy that she brings through. Her real name is Ursula, but that just felt way too formal for her. We didn't name her that. We brought her home when she was about 2.5 years old. So one day John, my partner Jonathan, looked at her and just said, "Wow, she's such a Smurf," and that just kind of stuck. But she's the Smurf. You understand? That's her name, the Smurf, not just Smurf, because we still have to honor her magnificence. And she's very chatty in the morning, so typically she gets me up, and then Zoe, who brings through the wonderful elf and unicorn energy, often will wake me up as it'll be either one of them will wake me up in some sweet fashion, loud fashion. So typically my first moments are spent tending to their needs, which means I start my day interacting immediately with these beings who bring through an incredible amount of unconditional love and sweetness and joy into my life. And Zoe gets me outside immediately because that's her immediate need, is to greet the outside world, whether she needs to go to the bathroom or not. And typically it's not that she needs to go to the bathroom. She needs to go outside to greet the day. So I do that with her for a moment, and then I'll usually have a cup of tea, and then I check in on Facebook and email to see, once I've had my own kind of interactions there with these beings that I love. And I'm usually up before John is, so my morning is really quiet. I check in then on Facebook and email to see who is in need. I really use Facebook as a way to connect more deeply with those that I'm working with, those that I know. So I'll often put up a channeled message or quote, and that usually comes sometime earlier in the morning. So that's kind of the beginning of my day, typically.
Do you often wake up remembering your dreams?
I would say it varies depending on. It really varies. I have periods of time where I'm very aware of my nighttime adventures, and like for instance today I woke up without any consciousness whatsoever of what I was doing while sleeping, although it's likely that what I was doing while sleeping was primarily resting, because I expended a lot of energy this weekend in the workshop. So my assumption is when I'm not remembering my nighttime adventures, it's because I'm using that space to really go into kind of more of a stasis-like experience. When I do remember my dreams or my nighttime experiences, they're very vivid. And what I've come to be able to do is really know the difference between a dream and an experience. I'm able to decode the experiences, because when I wake up in the morning having had an experience, let's say an experience with an extraterrestrial or guides or whatever, my mental body doesn't give me those images and pictures and stories when I wake up in the morning. I'm given a whole different set of images and pictures and stories that really don't make sense to me, and then I come to understand, that's code, because my mental body is throwing up the filters to prevent me from accessing those other dimensional experiences. So then I decode that information and say, oh, yeah, that's really what was going on at night. I see. It wasn't that the characters from the TV show Entourage dropped me on my head. It's that 3 extraterrestrial beings carrying me dropped me on my head. Yes, that was a real experience I had.
Interesting.
Yeah,
but it's kind
great.
of fun to see the Entourage boys, I'm sure, if that was the case.
Yes, so it was, and I had watched an episode of Entourage that night. And I woke up in the morning and I had a bump on my head, and the dream was that 3 of the characters had dropped me on my head, and I thought, no, not with a real bump on my head. Nope.
So you had a physical manifestation of a bump.
Yeah.
Wow. So you didn't just leave energetically.
Correct.
Wow.
Yes. And there are those differences. We have nighttime experiences. I think most of our nighttime experiences are energetic, and our bodies stay in the bed. And then we have nighttime experiences where we have actual physical interactions, but we don't lose periods of our life because those who are interacting with us in our nighttime adventures have the ability to take us out of one moment in time and then put us right back in what appears to be the next moment in time, based on the technology that they've created and they're using.
Interesting. Wow. I'm reading quite a bit of the Seth material. Have you read Seth?
I've listened to some of it, and I'm very aware of it, of course, but I haven't read it, no.
Okay, I'm reading the early sessions, which was the material that they released after the books. And he's talking quite a bit about dreams right now, so you had my attention on that, because, that's super interesting. That's fascinating.
And you asked me what I have for breakfast in the morning. More often than not, I have either a green smoothie or a juice. I have green tea. I've really altered my diet radically since beginning channeling, since my first contact experience I had with my guide Miranda in 1996, and that certainly wasn't the beginning of my awakening. That happened much earlier than that, but that's when I established that direct contact with my guide. And almost immediately after establishing direct contact with my guide, I became a vegetarian. I was eating a hamburger one night in the restaurant that I was working in, and I could taste and feel in my body the fear that the animal itself had felt throughout its lifetime experience, and I just dropped the hamburger in the garbage can, and that was it for me and meat for quite some time.
It's great that you bring that up, because Megan's diet has changed a lot over the years, as mine has, and I think this is a really common thing that happens when you're connecting more with, your real energies, and some people are aware of why their diet is changing, and then some people are just like, I don't know, I just, doesn't make sense, but I don't want to eat this anymore. So that's a great reminder that, it's a natural part of this.
Yeah, it's happening to me again right now. It seems to come in waves. I make an adjustment, I go with that for a while, and then, here's another change. And, why don't you stop eating this or add this? So it doesn't happen all at once.
I've had the same, that's Megan, right? I've had the same exact evolutionary experience where, really? I'm at the point where, I had no meat at all in my diet for 7 years, and then one day I just started craving it again, so I brought it back in for a time, and then let it go for a time. But now I've cleared refined sugar out of my diet. I eat very little bread products. I'm really trending more and more towards full-on vegan and raw. I feel the best when I eat vegan and raw. Yet at the same time, I'll still eat fish every once in a while. I might have a little butter every once in a while. I can't say I'm any one thing in my diet, and I feel like sometimes to do that is to limit ourselves as well. So I'm just very in the moment now with what feels in vibrationally alignment with my body and what doesn't. And I find that's constantly changing.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh,
I have the same issue. Yeah. Well, not issue. It's a great thing. I love not having rules, but yeah, sometimes it's raw vegan for years. Sometimes it's meat. I just go with whatever my body's asking for.
Yes.
That's
yes.
fabulous.
I do find that when I did start eating meat again, I certainly noticed a difference between eating meat products that were locally and sustainably sourced, where the animals were treated with love and respect, and then, factory farm meat. I couldn't imagine eating factory farmed meat at this point in my life.
Yeah, I agree. So, that's a bit of your morning routine. So let's talk a little bit about work and client time. Are you fairly regimented with, certain days having client time? Do you schedule it week to week differently? How does that flow for you?
Yes, I'm very regimented, which as well has been an evolution. When I started channeling, I pretty, as anyone starting a business, which I think it's hysterical to call what I do a business, but I'm still trying to squeeze myself. Yeah, exactly. So I'm still using those third-dimensional terms and concepts to explain my reality, and that sort of fits. When I began channeling and doing readings as my professional work, which was interesting, I'd not really ever intended to do this as my work. This was something that I did because I felt called to channel. I felt called to bring the energy through. I loved the experience and continue to love the experience of being in this space with the guides and bringing information through for other people. It was profoundly life-altering for me when I established that direct contact, and I couldn't try to package it as work. I didn't want to package it as work in my consciousness. But ultimately what happened was I got to the point where all I wanted to do was channel. And I was waitressing at the time and having what appeared to be a failed experience of being an actress, meaning I was just tired of auditioning and working for free, basically not getting paid to perform. And I loved to perform, but I was exhausted. I was in my late 20s, and as I wanted to spend more and more time channeling, the restaurant I had worked at for almost 10 years closed. And I heard very clearly from my guides, okay, now just take this and do this. And I said, no, not interested in charging money for this. And then so I got myself a new waitressing job with the same company, and it became immediately clear to me that I could no longer wait tables within one day of being in that new environment. I knew I was done as a waitress. And so I gave my notice and approached a number of different metaphysical bookstores in Chicago, which is where I was living at the time. And for the first couple of years of my practice, I was $1 a minute tarot card reader and psychic, and that's how I began my quote-unquote work in this world. And from that moment forward, this has been the entirety of my work. I jumped off the bridge there, the cliff, the whatever you want to call it, into the unknown, trusting my guides and trusting myself and following my heart. And, that's what became clear to me was, I really just wanted to spend as much time channeling as I could. So why not allow that to also be my work, do this thing that I loved as my work. And what I also recognized there was it was another opportunity to serve humanity. It was an opportunity for me to bring information to people that I wouldn't be able to access in any other way other than formulating it as work. Because there's only so many friends and family that you have. Eventually you got to start interacting with other people. I'm giving you the very long answer to a question you asked.
Great. Yeah.
So along the way then, I was constantly challenged by my guides to jump off the cliff again and again and again. So I worked out of the metaphysical bookstores and then slowly started to develop also a private practice out of my home. And one by one, I would recognize in my body when it was time to leave a particular metaphysical bookstore, when my contract there was done, and every time it was time to leave, I didn't have the money in the bank or the assurity that it was time to leave. I had the certainty in my body and the confirmation from my guides, and that's always back and forth for me. It happens almost simultaneously at this point, or it does happen simultaneously, where I will feel in my body exactly the information I'm receiving from my guides. So every time I would give notice at a bookstore, I would eliminate the illusion of outside jobs, outside sources of income within the context of this work, until suddenly I found myself just with a private practice without any place to quote-unquote work out of or be employed by. And that developed and evolved, and I saw clients regularly for 4 days a week for years, and just found other places to teach out of and lecture out of. I became much more fluid, and then it was, you want to move to California, what are you waiting for? Go. And at that point, my practice was largely in person in Chicago. I had people coming into my home. So now the guys were saying, and my body was saying, and John, my partner of almost 16 years, we were all saying, okay, we want to move to California. Go. Do it. So we moved to California, and then my work developed into this kind of more virtual experience where I'm working with people by phone and Skype all over the country and all over the world. And I don't think I would have the expanded practice I have. I know I wouldn't have the expanded practice I have if I hadn't jumped off the cliff again and again and again, trusting that every time I leapt, I was simply expanding my experience and expanding my availability. So now I see clients 3 days a week. I have a very regular schedule. I have a schedule of teleconferences that I do, group sessions I do, and then I have irregularly scheduled lectures and workshops and interviews, and that's my work life now.
Do you do
awesome.
back-to-back sessions with people?
I give myself a half hour between each appointment. The only time I'll do a back-to-back appointment is if two people are traveling to see me in my home together. Perhaps I might do a back-to-back with them. I'll give myself then 5 minutes in between and then just go back.
Because your work, do you find it physically taxing sometimes or draining? You have to kind of recharge?
Definitely can be physically taxing and draining, as I think can anything that we do on this world that requires a tremendous amount of concentration and energy, expression of energy. I think that's true for anybody who's, I think, following their passion and their bliss in the way that I am, and I do see that with my work. And I think there are so many different ways you can have that experience here on planet Earth. When you throw yourself into it in the way that I do, or somebody does who's working in this way, then there is, I think, at times that physical exhaustion. So I have learned over the years to say no, to develop a schedule that allows me plenty of rest, plenty of downtime, and I do have a lot of downtime. I give that to myself. I have a lot of alone time. I enjoy my alone time. It's interesting. When I was younger, I was extremely social and extremely gregarious, always wanting to be out of the house, always wanting to be interacting. I hated being alone, and that was really a manifestation of my loneliness. Once I connected with my guides, in that moment, I shattered the illusion that I was alone. I never again have felt alone since that moment. So now, being with myself is a much fuller and richer experience because I can't run the illusion any longer that I'm lonely.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I don't think I've ever really felt lonely, and I've always had that guide, experience with me. I've always just seen them around, and that's really cool that you've had that contrast.
Yes, it's really been amazing. And I have had real contrasts. Like for the people who watched me go through what I went through back in 1996, 97, 98, I think it was quite startling for some of them because, I was like goofy, awkward, insecure Nora trying to be an actress and waitressing and constantly being rejected by men, and that was just my MO. That was my identity, or what I believed to be my identity. And I was a huge drama queen and very emotional and super sensitive, and I was a little crazy, lovable but crazy. I think, which probably people still view me that way. And then I went through this big shift, and I suddenly started espousing all of this higher information and integrating all of these higher beliefs and profound beliefs, and really altered in many ways my personality and my identity. And I went through a very dramatic change. Yes.
Do you want to talk about that for just a minute longer, as far as do you consider yourself having an awakening? My life has changed radically over the past 5 years, and basically 5 years ago I didn't really even know what the word metaphysical meant, and now it's so important to me. It's my whole life. I'm shifting daily, which has been a little hard too. But what was your experience like? Like, were you just your typical kid growing up, or were you always kind of spiritually aware? What do you feel?
I was very typical. Grew up in the suburbs outside of Chicago, in a very, very white, very middle class neighborhood. I was, very, very typical. And then my parents divorced when I was, although I was always very sensitive, very emotional, and often defined as more intellectual or smarter than a lot of the other kids around me. That was what I really valued when I was younger, was being smart. So I often asked a lot of questions. I often asked a lot of questions. I often was constantly questioning my reality and questioning the way things were done around me. It was hard for me to take things at face value. I always wanted to peel back the layers and look at how things worked. So that was, I think, a little different about me, in that I was constantly curious about how things worked, not like how a radio worked, how the mechanics of society worked, how school worked, why it was I had to adhere to certain rules. That was kind of constantly happening. And then my parents divorced, and my mother became involved with somebody who abused me for years. And as that experience happened, as I co-created that experience with him, used him in that way to break from the illusion of the reality I had incarnated into, I started to find myself interested in healing. And I sought out my first therapist when I was 15. I became very independent, felt very detached from my family, but I wasn't in any way aware of the guides around me. And I know I set it up that way. I know I set up in this incarnation for myself that trauma, that experience, that period of darkness, that period of isolation and loneliness, because I developed rapidly a sense of compassion and empathy and sensitivity that now comes to me very naturally when I work with others who are in that kind of space, or who are still carrying with them those kinds of childhood experiences. And then when I was in my early 20s, maybe 20, somebody suggested to me that I get a deck of tarot cards, because the one thing I also was I was always intuitive. I was always really intuitive. I could look at somebody and just know about them, and that was part of the major conflict I had with my stepfather. I immediately recognized his sociopathic tendencies when I met him, and he saw me recognize it, and that set off this relationship between the two of us for years. So that intuitive process was always there for me. It's funny, I ran across a letter a high school friend had written to me, and she was saying, like, do you really think this this boy likes me, or are you just having another one of your intuitive and psychic moments? And I read that when I was in my 30s, and I was kind of shocked by that because I didn't see myself as intuitive or psychic when I was younger. I could contact my mother telepathically. That's something I was aware of that I could do when I was younger. If I needed her to call me and I had no way of getting a hold of her, this was long before cell phones and, gosh, even answering machines at times. I could sit wherever I was at home and just send her a message for 5 minutes to call me, and usually within a matter of minutes, I would get a phone call from her. So I knew about telepathy. I knew about extraterrestrials. I knew about all of these things, but I didn't really see it as primary to my experience. Then I started reading tarot cards in my early 20s, and that really opened up my own personal intuitive and psychic abilities. And I then became very connected to my intuition, and I could very clearly predict and define things that were going to happen for the people around me, for myself, if I was willing to get out of my own way and release my own attachments and look at the truth of what was being shown me. And that's very hard. You probably both know how challenging it is to try to do a reading for yourself. And then it was in 1996, when I was 29 years old, that I established direct contact with Mirando. That was a tipping point for me in what had been a very slow evolutionary process of awakening to what appeared to be a sudden awakening moment.
Wow. I love your story, Nora, and I really relate to a lot of it, although happened for me a little later age-wise, but fascinating. Thank you so much. It's reassuring. It's so reassuring to hear how this happens for people.
Well, and it's interesting because I was talking about this on the weekend. When I started reading tarot cards, even when I started channeling, I didn't do it with the intention of being more spiritual. In fact, that wasn't really that interesting to me back then. I did it because I was lonely and feeling desperate and needy, and suddenly I had these tools that I felt would help me better understand why it was I didn't have a boyfriend and didn't have money and didn't have the life I wanted to have, and maybe through the use of these tools I could start to acquire those things. Even in my first year of channeling, I was constantly asking about relationships and money and work, but they were also weaving in all of this information about the higher self and all this past life data, and suddenly I began to shift from using the connections and the techniques and tools to try to better my own ego's desires, and instead open up to the idea of integrating my higher self, handing off this body to the energies of my higher self, and allow that energy to come through on a more regular basis. And that's an evolutionary process I see people going through, and I saw it in my work. In the first few years of my work, it was many years in my work, still in my work. People will come to me, usually because of those basic issues. They want help with relationships and careers and their health and what appear to be these kind of third-dimensional issues, and the guides work with them in the way they worked with me. They'll come at those subjects and those topics and that information, and it's not that they're unimportant at all. They're incredibly important to all of us. And at the same time, they'll weave in this other understanding of, oh, you're not a victim, you're a creator. Oh, you're creating all of this. Well, if you're creating all of this, why not shift the question from will this happen to how can I create this, and what do I need to look at in myself that's creating the opposite? And, that's kind of how the conversation goes now with the people I work with, and that's the conversation they had with me for years. Still have with me. Let me be fully honest here. They still have with me at times. I still get an occasional kick in the ass, a reminder that I am a creator being, that the victim perpetrator story is all an illusion.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have that sometimes intellectual knowledge of, yes, I am creating everything, but when it doesn't go right, it's fun occasionally to blame others, even though you know.
Absolutely.
brief moment. Maybe it isn't my fault.
You said something really important there. You used the word fault. You know, and I think that's the thing that trips us all up as we integrate the understanding that we're creators. We have to remove words and understanding of our reality that align with ideas around fault and shame and blame, and instead step into a very neutral space. We've all got to look at what it is we are in the process of creating from a completely neutral space to be able to own it. Then we can do something about it. Then we can shift it. But if we're applying fault to either ourselves or anyone else, we just stay stuck in our creation.
That's a good point. Very good. I know I wanted to ask you if, so you connect with all sorts of energies, and are you connected all day, and do you go to the grocery store and you're at Whole Foods and somebody's across from you, and do you get messages for those people? And do you ever act on that, or how does that work? Because that must be like, excuse me, I'm Nora, and I have a message from the Pleiadians. Not everybody wants that.
In fact, when I started channeling and I was waitressing, I would do that with my customers, and I sometimes got in trouble from the management because I was freaking out my customers. You know, and then there were other times when I would find myself overwhelmed by the amount of data I was receiving. For instance, I was waiting on a couple one night, and I just looked at them and I heard very clearly he's physically abusing her. You know, and I walked in the kitchen and I said, I don't want to know that. Like, I don't need to know that. Stop talking to me. Shut up. Like, that was the conversation I had with my guides in the middle of the kitchen of a restaurant that seated 600 people. So imagine the noise, like the third dimensional noise all around me, and then also the noise of all of that data. I was, in large part, during that first year of channeling, completely out of my body half the time, not able to function as a normal human. Like, I felt often like I was sleepwalking in some ways through my life. I was showing up and doing things, and then part of me was off somewhere else trying to access all this higher information. It was a wonderful time, and it was also a little crazy. And they said to me back then, look, we're always transmitting. You know, you can't do anything about that. You can't change the transmission. What you have to do is learn how to adjust your operating system and turn the volume up and down on when it is you want to be receiving information. That was the piece I got that night in the kitchen of the restaurant when I was screaming at them to shut up.
That's awesome.
I just see that as a funny image, you know, screaming at the higher beings to shut up. But that's pretty much the relationship I've always had with the beings that I refer to as my guides. I see them as peers. I see us on the same plane. I believe that is the truth of our relationship with the guides, with the angelics, with all of these higher vibrational beings. We're high vibrational beings ourselves who are just putting on the earthly costume. So when I meet with them, I allow myself to feel I am on the same level with them, which I think has also really allowed me to expand in my work in a very easy way. I don't run those kind of hierarchical constructs with the guides and with those beings. So now when I'm out in public, it's like there's a constant stream of data that I'm aware of, that I'm connecting to. Anytime I look at somebody, interact with somebody, even drive by somebody, it's there. All that information is always there, and it's there for all of us to access. And then what I do is pick and choose when it is I feel it's appropriate to access it, or perhaps the higher self of the other person highlights the data stream for me, what it is they're transmitting, so I pay a little more attention to it. And then, more often than not, I'll send energetic transmissions. I don't really verbally any longer deliver those messages in public don't randomly walk up to people often and give them a piece of information verbally. I'll do it energetically. I'll notice, because their energy was highlighted for me, that they're in need, and I'll send a transmission of unconditional love while pushing my grocery cart down the aisle and selecting what it is I need for myself. I can do both of those things at once. There are times, however, where I find myself engaged in conversation with a cashier, someone in line. That conversation has begun, and then we're talking about something, and then suddenly it's obvious I have a verbal message to deliver, and I'll deliver it, and I'll do it in a very kind of organic and sometimes even very generic manner, where I'm not specifically honing in. Because I'm aware of the buttons that can get pushed there, and I'm also aware of not wanting to violate their boundaries. Mm-hmm. So I tend to do it in a very subtle way.
Can you give us an example?
Years. Sure.
Of what it would look like?
Yeah, I'll say to somebody, how are you doing today, to a cashier? I'll recognize the cashier's depressed or whatever. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm having a hard day. Oh, I'll say I'm sorry to hear that you are experiencing a hard day. Like right there, in my language with them, I'll re-language back to them my understanding of reality. And then I'll say, maybe if you just took a breath and remembered that you can choose what it is you feel in any moment, you'd find your day getting better. And I'll do it in this really gentle kind of guiding way. And more often than not, the person I'm interacting with immediately brightens up, because they hear a universal truth and they remember in the moment, oh, right, I'm a creator. So it's not like I'll go in and go like, oh, yeah, I see your boyfriend was a jerk, and, that's why you're feeling sad, or that's the story you're telling. Now, if somebody offers me more specific details, sometimes I will give specific details. So I also base my responses on what it is they're offering verbally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they're opening that door.
Exactly. And I have learned the hard way to not volunteer information verbally unless it is verbally asked for. Yeah. Because if the question isn't asked, they don't freaking want to hear it out loud, the answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I have to respect that. Like? I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
I was just going to ask, what does it feel like in your body to be connected to these energies all day and to be in a session? How much, I think I heard you say once that you're pretty much a group being. You kind of let go of having that singular view. Can you explain a little bit more about how that feels to you?
Yes. I think that's a great question. So I'll talk about how it used to be and then explain how it is now, just for that contrast, a better understanding.
Perfect.
So I used to experience all of the beings as energetic beings that existed outside of my body, and to access them, I had to work hard at raising my vibration to be able to receive information from them, which happened telepathically or in a stream through my body. And that, yes, felt very exhausting to me. And part of that, I believe, is because of where collective humanity was at when I began channeling. Collective humanity was in a much denser vibration. So as an individual, to access a higher vibrational transmission or connection, I had to work really hard to create that. Then over time, as I began to realize I could use channeling not just to get more stuff, but to help me integrate my higher self and be that higher version of myself here on Earth. And that's one of the things I've used channeling for. I've used channeling as a tool for integration and reascension, because as I bring that higher vibrational information through my own chakra system and my physical body, I've cleared a tremendous amount of trauma that I either brought in with me from other incarnational experiences or from my childhood experiences. All of that light and energy and love moving through me has made it much simpler for me to clear all that underlying trauma, which allows me to then have more space and room and access in my chakra system and my body to allow for my higher self to more fully inhabit. And as that occurred, I began to become aware of the pieces of my energy and the pieces of my genetic makeup that are Pleiadian, that are fairy, that are Yeshua, that are Lyran. And as I began to understand that about myself, I began to feel like that collective being. Like, okay, Nora is just a piece of a collective being that's here, and I don't experience the Pleiadians outside of me any longer, per se. I experience them here in my heart center, in my own body, and then I am also aware of the bigger collective entity that exists outside as well. So I experience both at once.
That's beautiful. And do you carry yourself differently? You know, like that embodiment, what has that done for you physically?
I do feel like I carry myself differently. I feel like, you know, especially when I'm more consciously aware that that's what I'm holding in the moment. I'm not always consciously aware that that's what I'm holding in the moment. You know, I certainly still have moments. Yeah, I still have moments where I just feel like Nora, I hate to say that, you know, because that seems to imply on some level that any of us are less than, you know, that description that I was giving earlier, and we're not. You know, we're all amazing beings of light, every single one of us, part of collective identities. You know, one of the issues I've always had in this lifetime is an issue with weight. I incarnated into a genetic line that tends to be heavier and carry more weight on my father's side. And I'm aware of the amount of energy that I run through me and the amount of information I pick up from others, sometimes as manifesting as more physical weight on my body, and then I'll go through these huge emotional clearing processes. You know, I'll go through these big emotional breakdowns triggered by typically what appears to be an event outside of me, part of my experience, but it seems sudden, and then suddenly physically I release, 30 pounds of data and information and experience that I was carrying with me, and then I'll find over time I've quote-unquote gained that weight back, and that seems to be another storehouse of data and information, and then I'll use another emotional episode to clear, and then I also incorporate yoga into my life. Yoga has been really essential for me in helping me feel more physically aligned with that higher vibrational information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
That's super interesting about the weight and relating that to more energetically releasing things.
Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I eat and how much I exercise. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I've really come to understand that. And that's been one of the most torturous pieces for me about aligning with this body, is feeling that issue with weight. I mean, I was put on a diet for the first time when I was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So there's that piece of it. There's like the very human, being a little girl, being a fat little girl, and, all that brought about. And I know I've accessed lifetimes where I incarnated and aligned with what were, for the times, very physically beautiful expressions, and then used my physical beauty to manipulate and kind of play with others. So there's that karmic piece in it for me that I'm very aware of, that again allowed me to access deeper compassion and empathy, but then there's also all this energetic stuff as well that I was just having a conversation with them this morning in preparation for the interview. I felt like this was going to come up in the interview, and that this was really the piece they gave me this morning about stored data and carrying it, releasing it. And I'm really working on it because I'd like to not carry it physically. And then at the same time, I have to step into a greater acceptance with myself and be with myself exactly where I am right now. And this is where I am right now. This is how I operate right now. I don't want to judge it as wrong or bad. So much judgment about body and weight and what we all carry.
Wow, Rachel, that's so fascinating, isn't it? The weight issue. I have to say, I have lost some weight in the fall, maybe around 10 pounds, and I did it somewhat the traditional way, but at the same time I've been seeing a chiropractor who basically works energetically and definitely has help, spiritually working through him. And I finally did lose the weight, and I feel like it's really sticking, and I wonder now if it's really all the stuff I've released has allowed my body to sort of settle into a different physical weight for a while, and it could change again. But I've been noticing it lately that it feels different this time. It wasn't just, a diet and I watched my calories. I did do that, but I also was doing emotional work. And that's so, well, it's very timely. What a coincidence, Nora.
I had a recent, back in 2011, I released 40 excess pounds. I don't ever get on a scale, so I'm guessing that it was around 40 pounds. I stopped getting on a scale by the time I was 16 years old because I've been put on a scale on a daily basis from 8 years old to 16. Also, by that point, when I was, I think, 14, 15, I'd lost the ability to feel hunger in my body. I'd had so much manipulation with my diet and my weight. I'm still unraveling trauma from those experiences. So occasionally I think that's also my awareness that I'll put weight back on because I'm still working through the releasing of all the trauma I feel around being a fat kid and what it was to feel so powerless in that. And then, to have my family constantly drawing it to my attention. That's another way I was abused, and I do see that as abuse. I think I really want to share that today, my perspective, that to continually monitor your child, to shame them for being any way, whether it be whatever it is, constantly shame them and judge them and manipulate them and control them in any way, shape, or form is abusive. So to have that done with food, and that was my experience with food, that's still something I'm working through and clearing. But in 2011, I established contact with the Lyrans and the Lemurians in a big way. They started to really bring through all this really massive information about the creation of Lemuria and the first Earth and the destruction of the first Earth and the Orion Wars, and I was really heavy at that time. And then my partner John and I went through what looked like was going to be a breakup at that time. We went through a big process emotionally, and I thought for certain, as did he, that we were separating, and I went through this huge emotional release. And so much of it was about accessing all of this past life information or other lifetime information and stored data. And on the other side of it, he and I remained together, didn't play out the illusion of separating in this life. I had suddenly accessed all of this extremely, what I felt to be important information about our history, some of it which was very personal to me, and I wound up 40 pounds lighter on the other side of it. So I'm wondering I'm looking at myself and I'm a bit heavier again, and I'm like, I wonder what's coming next.
What's coming? And
what big piece? Yeah, what big heavy piece I'm about to access as I'm a bit bigger and heavier now. And part of me is like, yay, and then part of me is like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Now what?
It's it's just so symbolic, right? In the end, that's
yes. Yes,
beautiful.
And I'm very physical in my experience with my work. So if I'm going to channel for somebody about something, I want to have real physical understanding of it. So I will play out whatever in my personal life so I can have a better understanding of it for the clients I'm going to be working with. So that kind of gives you a little window into my day-to-day reality. And John, although he's not on the phone with my clients, is always present in my work. He is a full partner in my work, in part because we are fully partnered in our day-to-day life, committed to integrating our higher selves, coming at our reality from the creative viewpoint. We're constantly relanguaging with one another, constantly reminding each other of the universal truths. When one of us wants to slip into victim mode, the other one is right there to say, cut, no, cut it out, like that's not true. One of our favorite things to say to one another when we're fighting is, like I'll say, like, you're such a jerk, and he'll say, just a reflection, because that's the universal truth, right? That especially those we choose to partner with are reflections of our own stuff. Yeah, this is a day in the life. This is the day in Nora's life. I am never apart from my work. It is my work is my life. It's my day. It's all the same to me.
Well, one exciting part of your work that's coming up is the interview that was done with you for the interview with Extra Dimensionals. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, sure. So, probably many of you are familiar with Wendy Kennedy and her work with the Pleiadians and the other guides. Wendy and I have known each other for many, many years in this life. I first met her in 1996, right after I had established contact with my guide Mirando in Chicago. However, Wendy and I have known each other throughout many incarnational experiences, and we've accessed a lot of that data individually and together. In fact, that was part of our beginning work together, was not only were Amy, Wendy, and I, Amy is their third friend, not only were the three of us channeling together, we were also remembering our experiences on Atlantis and Lemuria together while channeling with one another. So it was a reunion there, and we know it was a planned reunion. It's very clear to us as we look back on it. Was very clear to us then what was happening, that piece of it. So Wendy and I have known each other for all these years. We've worked together, and a few years ago she let me know she was attending these meetings in Los Angeles called the ET Media Group, and the intention of the meeting was to put together subject matter for film, TV, radio on the subject of extraterrestrials, contact, experiences, etc., that whole thing. So I started to go, and the meetings were hosted by Steve Bassett, who is a lobbyist for ET disclosure with the government and is working very hard at lobbying for disclosure. And the meetings were hosted by Reuben Langdon, who is a filmmaker and actor, stuntman at his studio in Los Angeles. And immediately upon meeting Reuben, so I decided to start attending. Immediately upon meeting Reuben, I felt a really just very strong connection, and like, oh, perhaps I was there to know Reuben a bit more. That was one of the reasons why I was there. And I noticed over time that Reuben started listening to my downloads and my transmissions. I'd see his name come up there in my work, and we would interact with one another at the meetings, and then the meetings kind of disbanded, and Steve got busy on this huge project he's working on with congressional disclosure, and Reuben is helping to do that, and there's wonderful DVD series and a Vimeo series online on disclosure right now. They did a mock disclosure trial with Congress people, and it was very well received back in, I think that was 2012 that they did that. So Reuben contacted me about a year ago, and he let me know that he wanted to come up and do an interview with me and film it on my experiences with the Pleiadians and other ET beings, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do with the material, but he knew he was going to do something with it, and he talked to Wendy Kennedy, and he was going to talk to other channels. So a year later now, after sitting with Reuben a couple of times and having him film some B-roll, he's released a docu-series on the Internet through Vimeo called Interview with ED, Extra Dimensionals, and each interview is with a specific channel and the beings that they channel. So there's a lot of free content. The interviews with the channels themselves about our personal lives are free, and there are bits and pieces he's segmented off of free information. And then the docu-series itself there's a small fee to rent or buy the interviews. So my episode is the third episode, and that'll be released sometime in the next couple of weeks. And I previewed it already. I'm really happy with the work and the presentation of it, and I'm really happy with Reuben and his energy. He's very willing to put himself right smack dab in the center of information and material that is kind of cutting edge when it comes to ETs and contact with ETs, and he's a working actor and filmmaker and stuntman. He was in Avatar. He was the stunt person and the body double for the lead in Avatar. So really, you saw more of Reuben in Avatar than you did the actor himself who played that character. So yeah, that's the big new exciting piece for me. And then I'll be doing something called Channel Panel in LA. I'll just throw that in there now in September with Rob Gautier and Wendy Kennedy and Lee Harris and some other fantastic, Daniel Scranton, some other fantastic channels. It's 2 days of channeled information and material in September in LA, and there's info on my site and all over the internet about that one.
Wonderful. Yeah, I saw the first episode of that interview series, and it's really well done. And, yeah, you just get such a genuine vibe from him, and I love it. I can't wait to see your episode. I'm really excited about that.
Thank you. Yes, I really, again, have enjoyed working with Reuben, and you're right. He is very genuine and very sincere, and he is a seeker himself. He is in the process of actively and consciously integrating his higher self and using his work to further that experience personally, and it shows. You can really see that in his interviews and the way he asks and frames his questions. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So for all the information about you, Nora, people can go to noraherold.com. And
yes.
Yeah. I want to just thank you so much for allowing us to peer into your life, and for you, offering all the information that you do. It's really helped me in my own journey and understanding how I'm connected to ETs and my higher self and all the other themes that you talk about. So just personally and collectively, I really want to thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. That was Rachel, yes. And thank you so much, Megan, both of you, for offering me the opportunity to connect. And just to connect personally as Nora. I think this is the first interview I've done where it's all Nora. So this is really, and I could certainly, I'm never apart from the Pleiadians and all the other beings, so I could certainly feel their energy at times supporting my voice and my experience. I can feel them right now. But yes, I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Oh, I so enjoyed it, Nora. There's just something comforting about your voice, and for me, almost familiar. Like I've known you forever, and I don't know why, but it's just that gut feeling. So
that's lovely, Megan. Well, then I'm certain that we do know each other.
Yeah,
and let me say that, when any of you listening, when you have those kinds of feelings, or if you ask that kind of question of yourself, I wonder if Nora and I have known each other before, you're asking the question because the answer is yes. You're only asking the question because you already know the truth of the answer. So let yourselves know that in the asking of the question, you're already giving yourselves your answers.
Yeah, I notice it more and more with people I meet, and there's certain people I just connect very quickly with, and I've just come to realize and accept it. I don't always understand it, but it's the way it is. Sometimes you just feel that familiarity.
Yes.
And so wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, and thank you to all of you who tuned in. Much, much love.
Thank you, and much love to you as well.
Yeah, right back at you, Nora. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Rachel, I could talk to Nora all day.
I know, me too. It would be the first 24-hour radio show.
That's right. No breaks for food. Pack a picnic.
Yeah. So smack at your desk. Yeah.
I just love how she was so able to talk about so many interesting topics, but in this very grounded, natural way. Nothing was far out, or it was just calm, and fascinating. I learned a lot.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I feel like I got a hug, you know?
Yeah.
Her energy is very soothing and grounded and reassuring, and she takes these concepts that we do think of as, you know, out there, or if we doubt ourselves when speaking about things, you know, she talks about it like it's just the way it is, and I love that too.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can bug her again in the fall to come back. And I'm glad that, you know, she felt like this is the first time in a while somebody interviewed just Nora, you know, because you know, she is just as important as the energies, you know, she brings in. So, yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and like she said, you know, whether she's speaking in their voice or not, they're always a part of her. So we always get the whole picture. And and I think that was a really great little part of the conversation, because we're all really that. You know, we're all much more than, you know, as she says, just our personality self.
Right.
So that was great.
Yep. When you're speaking from the heart,
I loved it.
Me too.
I will definitely be listening again to pick out all of the extra bits I didn't hear the first time.
Me too. I was sitting halfway through thinking, I can't wait to listen to this again.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Sorry, Megan. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, everybody, thanks for listening. We appreciate you. We welcome your comments and your questions on our Facebook page. And, if you have a guest in mind that you'd love to hear, definitely let us know. And if you have any love for Nora, feel free to post it, and I'm sure she'll see it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I will play some announcements here regarding other shows. We're a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network, and you can find more about them on Facebook.com. But here's some information on other shows that are playing throughout the week. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Rachel, for a great show.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, this is Karen Newman from the show About Oneness, and here's what's coming up on the week starting on Monday, February the 9th until Sunday, February the 15th on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 and 2. Simply put, Rob Gauthier, founder of the EEN and the host of the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour has put together the greatest metaphysical radio network ever. 7 days a week we have shows that will aid you on your path to enlightenment, evolution, and ascension. On EEN1, Monday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is Heart to Heart Talk Radio with your host, Daniel Scranton. Join Daniel and his featured guests discussing a wide variety of metaphysical topics. Daniel channels the Creators, the Hathors, Ophelia the Fairy, the Archangel Michael, and the latest, the Unicorn Collective. Daniel and his guests will take phone calls and questions, and it's sure to generate high-frequency discussions. You can learn more about Daniel on his website, danielscranton.com, and also on Facebook. Go to the Events tab on Daniel's website to learn more about Daniel's upcoming events. Daniel's guest on Monday is Andy and Jonathan Goldman. They will be discussing the power of sound and the power of your voice. The Goldmans are facilitating World Sound Healing Day on February the 14th, and they'll discuss how you can be a part of it. On Tuesdays at noon Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, please join hosts Megan Crandlemire and Rachel Archelaus for Radio Inspiration, Expression, and Abundance for their show Soulfullpreneur. Spiritual business specialists Rachel and Megan will bring you inspiring conversations with people who are living their soul purpose. Frequent guests include psychic mediums, channelers, coaches, artists, and authors. They end every show with psychic readings and business coaching. Your questions about your spiritual business or life purpose journey are welcome. Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, is the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with host Rob Gauthier. Rob channels Treb on the first Wednesday of each month and will take callers' questions. And on the third Wednesday, we'll have special guests such as guest channelers and other metaphysical teachers. The other 2 Wednesdays are freestyle call-in shows to discuss whatever callers have on their mind. Tune in to Rob on Wednesday nights, and you can also find him at trebchanneling.com and on Facebook at the Enlightenment Evolution Network group page. Rob has 2 special announcements. On April 3rd to 5th, 2015, spend 3 days with Treb and Aradif in beautiful Asheville, North Carolina during the lunar eclipse. This is a 3-day workshop on channeling. Only 30 spots are available. And then on September 19th, TrubChanneling.com presents the Channel Panel, Awakening from Within. Channelers include Lee Harris, Sean Swanson, Daniel Scranton, Nora Herold, Wendy Kennedy, Brad Johnson, Sean Randall, and Rob Gauthier. This incredible live event is available in person and also on live stream. The cost of admission is $120 per day or $200 for both days, and on live stream, $50 per day or $100 for both. Go to TrubChanneling.com to purchase a ticket. Rob's guest on Wednesday night is the Reverend Robert Short of Cornwall, Arizona. He is a spiritual counselor and what some refer to as a UFO contactee and channel. His work began in 1952 when he was led by his extraterrestrial sources to Giant Rock, California, and the home of the famed UFO contactee George Bentassel. Since then, Robert and his family have all undergone UFO second, third, and fourth type of encounters. Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, join host Philip Malika with the Consciousness Evolution Hour. Join Philip and his special guests and co-hosts as they discuss the shift, ascension, timelines, metaphysical concepts, and the fifth dimension. Find Philip at the Consciousness Evolution 2.0 group on Facebook and also on YouTube. On Fridays, The Earth Experience with Kalina Angel, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. The Earth Experience explores our soul's expansion through our human experiences on Earth. Kalina will help you navigate and expand through the exciting confusions that we are manifesting as new 5D beings. Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Victoria Vives Kuong hosts Earth Sky People Radio, living in harmony with Mother Earth and awakening to an intergalactic society, bringing to you greater awareness regarding starseeds and extraterrestrial life, living in harmony with one another and with Mother Earth and with life beyond the Earth, the transformative power of music, frequency, and sound, shamanism, ancestral wisdom, and the star nations, intentional communities, self-sustainable and regenerative living, and the Interstellar Alliance, or Planet Earth becoming part of an intergalactic society, and much, much more. See all the details at victoriavives.com/radio. On February 14th at 10 a.m. Pacific, the third International Chanting for Peace and Laughter Worldwide Celebration with Victoria Vives Kuong and guests Rob Gauthier, Dwayne Hartman, Brad Johnson, Joy Miller, Kalina Angel, Goddess Gloria, New Earth Music with Misha Whirlwind, New Earth Tether with Gina Catoli, and many more are thrilled to be leading us in a session of sound healing, dance, and laughter. It's a free event for you to have fun while raising our collective frequency and contributing to the peace of the world. Go to victoriavives.com/peace and the number 3. On Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, is my show About Oneness. About Oneness is a radio program focused on celebrating the ongoing conscious awakening of our planet and a realization of oneness. The show for me is about integrating all of my experiences and following my highest excitement, which is tapping into the truth of the universe. If you would like to learn more about me, my upcoming guests, as well as see many videos of channeling teachings, you can go to aboutoneness.com. My show on the 15th of February will be a re-airing of my interview with my mentor and my spiritual mother, Caroline Hart, on EEN Network 2 on Saturday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. The Pied Piper and Texas Rebel hosting the show, Disclosure Now. Disclosure Now is the On the Edge of Our Seats show that covers all topics of disclosure, from the world's most famous and obscure UFO cases to cryptozoology, conspiracies, and all things that go bump in the night. Pied Piper started his journey in Michigan in 1993 as a preteen, seeing Bigfoot, and never can get enough in the investigating of all things paranormal. Texas Rebel is a wild Texas man who loves the same journey and has studied these same things for years. Join them as they cover all things in the human experience that just cannot be answered by anyone. And remember, you never have to miss any show on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 or 2. All shows are ready to listen to again immediately after they air on Blog Talk Radio on playback, or you can go to the Enlightenment Evolution Network YouTube page. Namaste, and back to the show.